Okay, and we'll go. But hi everyone, I'm Lauren, and we're today we're talking about the housing process in Spain. And yeah, we're just excited to talk about this process because we know this is one of the things that is the most stressful when moving to Spain, and we understand that you're stressed. And at the end of the day, everything's gonna be okay. But we're gonna just share some tips. And then we also have four panelists with us who are all currently teaching in Madrid, and they'll introduce themselves in a bit as well. But we're just really excited to chat about the housing process. Yeah, Marisol, you want to come in and say hi, and then Hafsa as well?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's really excited about this webinar, as I am. I hope you really enjoy this webinar, and we hope that all the information you get today is going to be very useful for you.
Yep, I can chime in. I'm Hafsa. I'm a program assistant. But yeah, just try to get as much information as you can and remember that this team is always here for you. So I hope you guys enjoy the webinar.
Well, thank you. Okay, so first things first, we have to share a TikTok, of course, of what does a Spanish flat look like. I don't think I have my audio shared, but we can just get a little bit of an idea. Okay, so now everyone knows what a Spanish apartment looks like. Okay, so today we're going to talk about what you can do before you arrive in Spain. We're going to look at your orientation schedule a little bit. It's kind of a sample schedule, but you'll get an idea. We're going to look at what's the first few days and weeks in Spain look like, recommended websites for housing, do's in the housing process and do nots, and then tips from current teachers who have been living in Spain for a little bit teaching. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. If you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A rather than the chat. That just helps us track questions that are coming up. So what are some things that you can do before you go to Spain? So most of you, and we know not all of you, have your placements, so you know where you're going to be teaching. So you can get an idea of the various neighborhoods that you might want to live in. You can use the website Idealista, and we'll have other websites at website recommendations as well to get ideas on prices, your budget, how many rooms those places come with, and just kind of get ideas of what the apartments look like in the different neighborhoods that you'd be willing to live in. Everyone should download WhatsApp on their phone before you leave for Spain. WhatsApp is going to be your main method of communication when you're over there for contacting landlords. You can reach out to rental agencies, and there's also a list of agencies in your housing handout, and that is in your pre-departure course. Let me pull that up. We have a housing handout here. This is also in Canvas, but there's a lot of information here about the process and kind of average prices and different tips for housing. Like I said, this is in your pre-departure course. If you've not logged in yet, you should, because we're going to bother you to log into it a million times before you go. It'll help you a lot with understanding different things that you need to know before you get to Spain. And then also there's a list of documents that you can present to your landlord. Some are like your carta, visa page. There's a various list of things that you might need to show someone when you're looking to rent. Be sure that you have access to cash and ATMs once you're in Madrid. Set up your Spanish bank account right away. There's also information in your Canvas course to set up that Spanish bank account. And then also everyone should book temporary accommodations starting the Friday after your orientation week. If you're in the immersion, the 2 or 4 week immersion programs, that's not as necessary because you're going to have housing during your CIE orientation for 4 days. And then you're also going to have either the 2 or 4 week homestay during that time. There's time to like have scheduled appointments with landlords and look at places, and you might be able to find something before your homestay is completed. But if you're just in our regular program, you're going to want to book temporary accommodation starting Friday of orientation week. And then around a week before your arrival in Spain, you should start setting up showings with landlords during either orientation week or right after orientation week. It's too early now to set up appointments with landlords because you're not in Spain. You're not going to Spain for a few months. They want to know that you're in Spain. They don't care that you're in the US now. So it really is too early right now to be super, super proactive with that. But those are some things you're going to want to do right before you do go. This is just a tentative orientation schedule, but Monday is pickup day, and usually there's free time in the afternoon. There's presentations usually Tuesday, Wednesday, with evening events. Thursday's usually a little more chill. There's usually a mini orientation session with a farewell event, and then time on Friday for appointments. We'll have an exact schedule closer to your arrival, but this is just kind of an idea of what, you will have some free time during orientation week, but really if you don't, like, you can start booking appointments with landlords either like Monday afternoon, I know it's the first day you get in, or Friday afternoon through the weekend to start looking at places. What can you do after arriving in Spain? You should get a Spanish SIM card either on arrival day or within the first few days. Usually orientation leaders will take you around and show you where to get a SIM card, but that's something you can do immediately so that you can start communicating with landlords. You should continue to set up housing appointments and visit places in person. It is highly recommended to see places in person before signing contracts and giving money to landlords. And also recommend practicing your commute over public transportation once, like, where, you get an idea of where you want to live and how you want your commute to look. It's good to just, get used to the metro, get used to the bus. And especially if you've not taken public transit before, you're going to love it when you get to Spain. And then, of course, sign your lease. Some common phrases when renting an apartment. I'm not going to go over this too much because I do not speak Spanish, but we'll save these slides and you can use them for later. And also you'll have tips at orientation as well. So here are some recommended websites. They're also on this guide. They were somewhere. Yep. There's some rental agencies, but here, where did I go? I'm lost. Okay, here we go. So for temporary accommodations, you can look at Airbnb. I've used Hostel World a bunch, Couchsurfing, Madrid for rent, and then for long-term rentals. So these are places that you'll like between these two, these are pretty common. Idealista, I think that's the #1 way that people find housing. There's Spot a Home, Fotocasa, Moving to Madrid, and then also just Facebook. Look at the CIA Facebook groups, but then also there's Facebook groups for everything. I looked it up. If you just look up housing in Madrid in Facebook, there are tons of different options to find groups. It's a little bit overwhelming, honestly. I don't know if there's a favorite, but I have been looking through these before, and there's just posts for tons of apartments around Madrid. So lots of people, lots of apartments, but it's just finding the right one for you. Yeah, and then there's also rental agencies. So a lot of people use rental agencies as well. There's usually a fee, or there's probably always a fee, but that also helps as well with just the process in case you wanted to look at rental agencies. And then there's other alternative like Workaway in exchange for rent. Maybe you're babysitting or doing homestay kind of thing. I would say though, most CI teachers use Idealista from what we've seen in the past. Some do's and don'ts. So booking temporary accommodation now. It doesn't need to mean you need to go do it right away today, but it's something to definitely keep your mind on, to book something for the Friday after your orientation, just so that you're not showing up to Madrid on a Monday, you're jet lagged, you're tired, you're meeting a million people and you're overwhelmed. And then on Friday, you're like, oh, I forgot to book a place. Like think about that. That is one of the things you want to do early on. I have some examples here of looking at, like, I did an example of, if you leave, this is an example for a September 2nd group. They have to leave on September 6th from the CIE hotel. One person wants a place for 2 weeks. So I'm looking at Madrid. We'll zoom out. There's the community of Madrid, this nice little triangle, and I'm looking for a place for 2 weeks. I'm seeing a lot of places in like the $30 range for per night, $30 per night on Airbnb for one person. So I think that's a pretty good deal. This is what I looked at today. As summer gets, you know, things might go up in prices. So booking temporary accommodations now might be a good idea, especially Airbnb and booking.com. Look at their cancellation fees and book something with like flexible cancellation. I always like that idea. And then I did another example of the same dates, but 5 of my friends, we all want to go and stay in a place together. So how much would that cost? We can zoom out and see the whole community of Madrid, and we're looking at that seems really cheap actually, but yeah, I guess it'd be about, you know, 30-40 bucks a person if you divide it by 5 for places if you were to get a group of friends together. Last year at orientation, I met a lot of people who were getting Airbnbs with like 5 different people, and I even met a group of guys. This one group of guys, they found housing and another group did not. So they're like, just store all your bags at ours while you look for housing. You can sleep on our couch, sleep on our floors. People at CI are really nice and they want to help each other out. So use the Facebook groups to meet each other. But ultimately, I'm just like showing examples of, you know, you could get a group of 5 people together for 2 weeks, have temporary accommodation, and be able to look for your housing in September before you start school. This is just an example. One more example I did want to show you was Hostel World. I've used them a lot, but it's just if you wanted to do a hostel and live there for a little bit, you know, you can see places. If we zoom in here, I'm going to zoom out first so we can see the whole community, this nice triangle. We go into the center, and also this is all examples in the center. This is not, you know, you don't have to be staying in downtown Madrid. These are just examples. And prices are, we're seeing 28 bucks a night, 33 a night, 29, you know, so $30 range per night is what I'm seeing right now for booking temporary accommodations. Just wanted to show you that because I think before you even find housing, it is important to know that you're probably not going to get housing within 4 days. You're not going to have it right away. So you have to have something temporarily set up so that you can go to your appointments when you're in Madrid. More do's is be flexible with the location of where you want to live. Some people are totally set and I want to live in Seoul. I want to live in the center. But have some flexibility, you know, you don't have to live like right in downtown. Maybe you're accessible by metro, but look at places outside the city center, especially to save money, and just to have a flexible mindset. Be patient and also be proactive in those first few weeks. It's going to take a lot of patience and you're going to have to be setting up appointments. And then also just make connections with people to find roommates, or you can find roommates on a deal list with Spanish roommates, but just making connections with people will help. Some don'ts is do not sign a lease or give money to a landlord without seeing the place in person. We really discourage that. Also, don't be discouraged if you don't get the first places that you see. It is competitive to get housing in Madrid. So, you know, you have to be proactive and just keep doing it until you get your place. And also you can use resources like, you know, talk to friends, other CIE teachers on how they did it. There's gonna be a lot of people you meet at orientation and you'll all be able to network and help each other. And do not expect landlords to speak English. Spanish, you're going to Spain, they speak Spanish. You're going to have to be creative with Google Translate and make connections with people who speak Spanish if you're a little worried about that. And then also do not think you're going to be in some fancy bougie place. They're probably smaller and not what you might be used to in the US. So just be flexible. and think of like, what is your must-haves in your apartment and what are your like can live without. Some tips from past teachers is calling landlords rather than texting. That helps a lot. Don't send money or move into an apartment that you've never seen. Reaching out to people in Facebook groups and arranging tours through Idealista before and when you arrive. And do not wait until after orientation to start searching for housing. Try to be proactive as much as you can before. So now you've heard enough from me, but we can hear from some of our current teachers on the program. All of these teachers, they actually went in fall 2000, what year is it? 22. So they've been there for 2 years. So some things that we're going to talk about are, you know, what are your housing must-haves versus things that they were flexible about? What was their budgets? You know, how did that work? How long did it take to find housing? Did you live with roommates? What does your commute look like? And any additional tips. So we'll take it away and start with Spencer. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
It's a little quiet, but yeah,
Okay.
it's good.
Okay, excellent. Well, yeah, let's see. It took me about 2 weeks to find housing when I first got here, and I was sort of despairing the whole time, even though, like, in retrospect, 2 weeks is not very long. It felt like forever, and I was just certain that it wasn't going to work out, and then it did. Part of the reason it was a little difficult is because I was kind of looking for the unicorn, right? Like a place in the center that's well connected and also like as cheap as can possibly be. And I did find that place, but you have to imagine that like a cheap place, like a low value place in a high value area is going to be kind of a lousy place. And indeed it was. So when they say be flexible about where you're living and be you know, cognizant of your must-haves and the things you can live without, that is very good advice. This year I'm paying a little bit more and I'm working a little bit more. I mean, we'll get into all of this during orientation, but I'm working a little bit more and it's absolutely worth it. But let's see, I lived with a roommate last year, a local, just one other person. I was paying, I think, about $370 a month. I was living in La Latina. It was a very old building. It was in some amount of disrepair, but it was convenient. Conveniently located, very well connected with transit. I was working down in Getafe, which is a little south of the center. It took me a little less than an hour to get to work. And this year I'm living in the same neighborhood, and it's all basically the same, but like I said, I'm paying a little bit more, and the place is a little nicer. Sorry, what were the other talking points again? Oh, brilliant, thank you. Additional tips. Yeah, it really is worth it to write out the things that you absolutely have to have. Like you have to live in the center, or you have to live with good transit connection to your job, or you have to live in a place with a lot of natural light, and to limit that to like seriously 1 or 2 things. Because if you've got a list of must-haves that's like 7 items long, you're just not going to find it. But you will find something. I guess that's what I'd like to end on is that like you shouldn't despair, because like it is really difficult and everyone thinks it's like super scary, and it is. I think it's widely regarded as like the scariest part of all of this, but it does work out, and like have faith and be confident.
Spencer, the first year, did you live with roommates, or what was that situation?
Yes, I had one roommate, and he had been renting the flat for a while. I found it on Idealista, and I was very lucky because I didn't speak any Spanish back then. And he was a local, but he was looking for a native English speaker to practice his English. So that's sort of staggeringly lucky. I think, you know, if you're looking for a place alone, that's going to be very costly, certainly in any sort of centrally located area. Everyone I know who comes here ends up living with roommates. Very often other like North Americans or English speakers, but occasionally locals as well.
Okay, anything else, or should we move on to the next?
I think that's about all I have to say. You know, the yeah, like don't despair. Really, it is going to be okay. Like don't worry too much about it. Just be proactive, and you will figure it out. But learning a little bit of Spanish is just incredibly helpful.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to Catherine. And Catherine, let me know if you want me to go back to that slide as well.
Will do. I think I have my notes here, but I'll let you know. So, hi everyone. My name is Catherine. I'm wrapping up my second year here in Spain, going into my third. And yeah, housing, it was very stressful, but much like Spencer, when I was doing my notes for this, I realized, oh, I was actually only looking for my first apartment for 1 week, and actually kind of the same for my second. So I found 2 apartments here in Madrid. So it is definitely doable. The main thing that was on my must-have list was I really wanted to live with native Spanish speakers, because part of my goal in coming to Spain was getting better at my Spanish. So I did already speak a bit of Spanish, coming into this experience. My first apartment must-haves was mostly living with Spanish speakers, and then the other factor was my commute. Other than that, I was pretty flexible. I actually made a bit of a mistake, I realized, when calculating the commute, though, because I looked at places that were physically closer to my school instead of just looking at all over at the neighborhoods and then doing Google Maps and seeing which one would be quicker on public transit. That actually can give you some more insight. But other than that, I was really flexible. And if there are only a few core things that are important to you, I recommend being as flexible as you can on everything else. So I did go in with a pretty high budget, actually. I decided to set my limit at 625, which is, I know, a lot for here. But I was really, really determined, and I was kind of lucky to have a job before coming into this experience. So the things like bed size and neighborhood didn't matter to me so much. So I ended up living in Prosperidad my first year with a guy from Venezuela and a girl from Ecuador who is still one of my really close friends to this day. And there were a lot of great things about living in that neighborhood. This year, I live in Lavapiés. I decided ultimately that I did want to be closer to the center, but I wouldn't close your mind off to other neighborhoods that are still in Madrid proper. So this year I'm living, in a cheaper apartment also, which is much nicer. Kind of like Spencer's, it's a bit older, things break a bit more, but I really love it here. And this year I'm living with 2 Spanish girls, which was actually the dream coming in. So I was able to do that. And I found these roommates using Body, which is another app. I'm not sure if it's in the list, but it's BADI. And it's a website where they'll post the apartments that are available, but it's also focused on who are you and kind of looking for a roommate match. And that's what I was looking for, and I had success both times. I will say on Idealista, we did have to find in my current apartment a new roommate recently. And we put up a post on Idealista, a very bad one, if I might add, with nothing but pictures of the room. And this was in September. We received something like 275 messages in the 4 days that the post was live. So one thing that I think helped me find my apartment really quickly, and it's a point that Lauren already covered, is calling someone on the phone if they make their number available. Because when you get that many people interested in a space, they're looking probably age, gender, do they have a job, and they're just basically swiping through you. So if you have the opportunity to call them, I would. And if your Spanish isn't really good, I would ask a friend. At orientation, you'll meet tons of friends who speak at least some Spanish, and some will be native speakers as well. So I highly recommend picking up the phone to call whenever you can, because just putting a message out there through the apps can be kind of tricky to get seen. But yeah, neither one of these processes took very long. I was very proactive. I found a housing within my first week when I landed with CIEE. I had a friend who said, get on Idealista now. And I looked a lot. I saw like 10 places and had housing in a week. At my next apartment, I found my new roommates within technically a week. And then I moved in a month later. So if you're actually really, on top of it, it may not take you that long. And even though it felt like the longest week of my life, it really wasn't so bad. And then a few other things. I talked about the roommates. I did speak some Spanish. The commute I was looking for, well, what I ended up doing for my commute was last year was about 40 minutes to get there, 40, 45. And this year, even though I lived further from my school, it was only 55 minutes, so only 10 more minutes for a lot more distance from my school. So that's a pretty standard commute for most auxiliares. And then to wrap up with a few tips, I highly recommend that you guys be adaptable and flexible on anything that's not a must-have or requirement for you, and definitely be proactive. So I would, like Lauren advised, start looking at these apps the week before you arrive to Spain and see if you can set up some appointments when you get there. And then finally, I really would, just in general, look at everything on Canvas. I know that CIEE is always telling you to look at Canvas, but there's really great stuff on there. And I actually downloaded my whole Canvas from my first year, and I'm still using those instructions to this day whenever I need to fill out paperwork. So highly recommend that in all things, but there's great tips for housing as well.
Thank you. Thanks for all that info. And next we have Kaylin. And also let me know if you want me to go back to the prior slide.
Okay, I think it's fine. I have it on
Cool.
the other side of my screen.
Awesome.
I'm Kaylin. I just finished my second year, going on my third. Very excited. As far as housing goes, I don't think I had any must-haves besides living in the center. That's really what I wanted to do. And so I found people who wanted to live in the center as well. I guess also, well, yeah, I guess I did have must-haves. Someone else who also spoke Spanish, particularly who was fluent and maybe a native speaker, just because you encounter so many different people and so many different accents and things like that. And I just like that, I guess. So luckily I found a girl who was there during my orientation, and I live with her, and I have lived with her for the past 2 years. So yeah, I found her through CIEE, and we decided to live together. And she does indeed speak Spanish. She is a native speaker. As far as budget goes, I don't really think I had a budget because I really wasn't thinking about that. Maybe I should have. But my other friends were like, oh, we're going for maybe 300 to 400 or 400 to 500, and we're trying to pay that. And I kind of based my ideas going into that for housing as like that is my budget, and that's what I want to pay. And typically living in the center, you do have to pay a little bit more. But you will find hidden gems on Idealista and Body and all those other websites that you can use. I used Idealista, and I scoured that website every day, every hour, so many hours, during orientation and after orientation, because I felt like, oh my goodness, school's gonna start soon, but it really wasn't. I was just freaking myself out, and it took other people being like, okay, like calm down. So it only took me maybe 2 weeks, so like week of orientation and a week after, to find an apartment. We scheduled maybe 30 appointments just to view housing. And my best advice is definitely call people, like everyone else has been saying. Don't just message. I mean, maybe if you message, follow up with a call. It's just easier. And like Catherine said, there will be people that will help you if you don't speak Spanish as well. I'll totally help you. I love to talk to people. I think I'm trying to remember what else is it? What do you pay for rent and utilities? Rent, I pay, I'll be honest, $512.50. That's water included. And then electricity gets taken out of my roommate's account, and it's not more than like maybe 20-30 every month, unless it's the winter and we've been using the heater, and that's when it gets a little more expensive. And Wi-Fi is separate. So I pay maybe, it depends on how much you use, not how much you use, how many gigs you prefer, and what company you go through. So you'll maybe pay 20 to 50 at the most, maybe 60. So it's not really that bad. Because I decided that I did want to live in the center, I knew where my school was before. I just didn't think about how far it was. But I live in Seoul, so right off of the line 1, 2, and 3. So my school was, sorry, oh, I might cry. My school was out in Arganda del Rey, and that's pretty far from the center. It's really easy to get there with I can't remember the age range. Is it under 26, I think, for the abono, where you pay €8, I believe. Easy to get out there because it includes all the zones, and Arganda del Rey is the last line, really far out, but not super far. I didn't really mind the commute. It was an hour and some change. So I could take a bus or 2 buses, three buses, or 2 metros, or cercanías, the trains in the metro. And then I just had to walk the rest of the way. And it wasn't really that bad. I got to read, catch up on things. And I did it every day because I loved my school and my students. But this upcoming year, my school's only maybe 30 minutes away, which is way easier. I'm gonna start crying. I think maybe some advice. Definitely call landlords. Don't call them after 5 p.m. Because people are getting out of work, going to do their things, spending time with their families. Also, do not call them between maybe 2 and 5 because we're having a siesta. Don't pay for an apartment before you see it. Always view an apartment. Try and get in there just to see how it is. Definitely look at Facebook groups because people will talk about potential landlords and scams that they have fallen victim to, and you don't want to do the same. So make sure you maybe check Facebook, ask other people about it. I think that really did help me as well. And then if a landlord doesn't call you back, that wasn't the place for you. I mean, what's the saying? I forgot the saying, but what is meant for you will be there. But that's it.
Yeah. Okay, so we have one more, and Jan, let me know if you want me to go back to that slide because I realize it's hard to remember.
That's okay. Okay, so first I wanted to explain what I wanted, what my expectation was when I got here. So my first year here, my school was not close to the center, not super far, but definitely not in the center of Madrid. And so I was looking for a 2-bedroom. Now that part I was flexible on. I was like, it doesn't have to be a 2-bedroom. It could be 1 bedroom. It could be a studio. I didn't want any roommates though. I wanted to have a pool at my apartment. I wanted to live near my school. And I had found like this perfect place. It was 700 euros a month. And I was like, I can do that. And I was instantly rejected. And that was really hard because I was like, that would have been the perfect place. I think I could have done that budget wise for myself. Now looking back, probably not, to be honest. But at the time, I felt like that would have been doable. But instead, what I got was a 4-bedroom. So I have 3 roommates. I did end up getting a private bathroom, which was not something that was on my must have, but I feel like maybe that was why I didn't want roommates. I did end up getting a pool, which is really nice. And instead of living near my school, I ended up living near a train station, like really close to a train station. It's basically in my backyard. And that was how I commuted my first year. My commute was about an hour because after taking a train, I had to take a bus. But the commute wasn't so bad. And there is a little bit of a benefit. I don't live in the center by any means, but I live a little bit more connected to the center. And that has allowed me more freedom to be able to travel on the weekends, like into Madrid, versus if I would have lived out by my school, the transportation is a lot, there's a lot more wait time for transportation on the weekends where my placement had been. So I'm glad that I ended up closer to the center, so I have more ability to go hang out with friends and do things kind of in the center where it's more connected. As far as utilities go, now I'm just going to list out like very rough numbers. So my math is not going to be perfect by any means, but this is just an estimate. I'd say I pay around 175 for electric and gas now, because I switched to having a fixed rate. But my first year when I was here, the company that I went through, I paid over 800 at one point. Well, as a like our bill was over 800 for heat in February my first year, because the company was like overcharging a lot. They ended up paying some of it back to us because they realized that they had made a mistake, but it was still over 800. It wasn't much they paid back. But I ended up being able to switch. Now, some landlords don't allow you to switch companies, I believe, or like, especially if you're only renting rooms, like you might not have control over that. But if you do have the choice, I would say like shop around a little bit to see which electric and gas companies are going to be better price wise. For water, we pay about 60 every 2 months. The internet is like 30 to 35. Again, as Kaylin was saying, like it just depends on like what you're looking for with internet. And then my like total rent for like the 4 bedrooms is 1,500. And so like roughly 1,750 total with all of that. And again, roughly like 450 per person. Now I did end up signing the lease by myself, and so I'm the only one on the lease. And the benefit of that is I get to choose who my roommates are, and I'm not just stuck in a place where like I'm not stuck with people that maybe I didn't necessarily want to be with. But at the same time, if I don't have roommates, I pay. So I'm on the hook for the money, and also any damages or anything that happen, like I'm ultimately responsible for that. So there's some benefits and some disadvantages to that. I spent 1 week when I first arrived in an Airbnb, and then I spent 3 weeks on the floor of some friend's apartment. I ended up getting an air mattress after about a couple days of being on the floor. But their apartment was unfurnished, so we were kind of all scrambling to get furniture and stuff. But I ended up finding a place that was fully furnished. But it just depends on what you're looking for with that. My advice when you're calling landlords is to save their number in your phone and put something after like some kind of description or something, and then put like you could put like APT for like apartment or something like that. And then you can just delete them all when you're done searching for a place. But putting it in there, because sometimes the same contact has a lot of different apartments. And so if they've already rejected you for any number of reasons, you don't want to be calling them constantly for different rooms. So I would just say save them in your phone, so that way if you go to call them, it pops up and you're like, oh, I can't, or they already said no. Or on the flip side, then if they're calling you back, oh, hey, this is an apartment that might be interested in me, versus just, some people, me included, don't like to just answer the phone when it's a random phone number. I personally had a friend call who spoke Spanish to help me to help me communicate. But then my landlord's daughter also spoke English, so she does a lot of the communicating with me. And I think also she was going to do that in general, but it's lucky that she speaks English. I did end up going through a private landlord. I wouldn't say that's like the most common thing, but they are more likely to be lenient on rules such as like how much you make and things like that. In my case, they just made me pay a double deposit instead of just saying no. So they have a little bit more cushion on their end, but I was still able to get the apartment. As far as roommates go, I got all of mine on Facebook. My advice with that is call people, like actually talk to them, video chat, get to know other people before you agree to be roommates with them, just because sometimes you can tell by a vibe that there might be something that you're just like, you know what, actually, I don't think that they would be the right person to live with. And if you're going to ask questions, I recommend asking open questions instead of leading questions. So, for example, instead of saying, is it okay if I have guests over? You should say, how do you feel about guests? Because you're more likely to get an honest answer with that. Because in the first one, their answer is probably going to be, yeah, it's fine if you have guests over, but they might not actually be okay with you having guests over every other day. But if you ask, how do you feel about guests? And they tell you, well, I think that it's fine to have guests as long as there's communication happening and, you know, whatever, then you have a little bit better image of how they are going to be as a roommate. And if they say, I don't think that we should have guests over, I think if we're going to spend time with people, we should go out, and you want to have guests over, then you know this isn't going to be a good fit. Let's see. A couple of things to consider when you're choosing where to live. First of all, a lot of places don't have an AC or dryers, so don't expect either of those to be in your apartment. If you do find a place with those, that's very lucky. Also things like dishwashers and even ovens, sometimes places don't have. So when you're checking out a place, if you are someone who really wants to use one of those appliances, make sure that they have it before you agree. Because I think in the US, we're just used to like, oh, every place is going to have an oven. But when you get there and you signed and everything, and then you're realizing, oh, wait, this place doesn't have an oven, or, you know, whatever. So just make sure you're really careful about that. If there's something that you're specifically looking for with that. But I would say don't expect there to be a AC or a dryer in the place. Those are two that I've found to be very rare to find. And then also when you're looking for a place, if you're living closer to the city, you're going to have a lot of noise, background noise at night. But if you live farther away and you like to go out at night, you want to look at like night buses or like schedules related to that, because you don't want to be paying a lot of money for like Ubers and taxis if you're going to be out late at night. So it depends on what you're looking for. But if you prefer to be up at night and out partying, living in the center is probably going to be better for you. But if you prefer more quiet, relaxed night, then I would say living a bit outside of the center would be helpful in those cases. I think that that's everything.
Awesome, thank you. Oh, okay, so it was nice to hear from everyone and some of their experience. Ultimately, I think, you know, like the housing process, we don't want to sugarcoat and say it's going to be like the best experience of your life. Like it's not, but it'll work out. So I know that we've been answering some questions as we're going, but I also want to just read a few out loud that it might be more relevant. And feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A and we'll just go through more until we're done. But I want, the first question I have is how long should we book our accommodations for the Friday after orientation? In a survey we took, it takes on average about 2 weeks to find an apartment if you're very proactive. It could take 1 week, it could take 3, but temporary accommodation, like 1 to 2 weeks. Any of you panelists have any insight on tips for that?
Go ahead, Jam. Sorry.
I personally think it depends on when you get here, because a lot of places will be available, let's say at like November 1st or October 1st. And I think it's a little bit harder to find a place that's going to be available like in the middle of October. So if you're coming the first week of September, like you might say like October 1st is going to be great. But if you're coming mid-September, you might even want to consider booking a place or being open to staying at a place until November 1st. Just because when you're looking for places, they're more likely to look for you to move in on the first of a month. So I think it just depends on when you're going to be here, to be honest.
I met someone last year who said she was going to live in a different Airbnb every month around the region. So she would just Airbnb hop. I followed up with her and she didn't respond about her experience, but I'll see if I can try again. That's pretty ambitious, I will say.
But yeah, I would definitely make sure you have accommodation for at least the week after orientation. So maybe go in with the Airbnb and friends, and then you meet so many people at orientation. If you need to figure something out after then, you'll meet so many people, you can probably stay on their couches, or if they also need an Airbnb, you can get one with them as well. So definitely plan for at least that first week. Although, because I started my search at the beginning of orientation, if you're super proactive, it might only take you that 1 week. I had a place 3 days after orientation ended, technically. So if you're really proactive, you probably won't need more than a couple weeks.
This question I'm just reading out loud because I think it's relevant for everyone, but is there transportation included in our arrival day? Yes, arrival day, the shuttle typically runs from 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. So get in before 1 p.m. To Madrid if you want to take the shuttle. If you have flights outside of that time, you'll just take a taxi or Uber to the hotel, and that is a 30 euro flat rate with a taxi. And I don't know, a year ago it was about a 20 euro Uber ride. So yeah, in case you are not within that window. We'll give more details for arrival though soon. Okay, question. None of you were in the immersion program, right? Just say, I don't think any of you were, yeah. So this question is for if you're in the 4-week immersion program. So for those who are going to have housing for 4.5 weeks, ultimately, should I still consider looking at apartments and such before arriving, or will I have more information once I'm there? I think personally, I think that you'll have 4.5 weeks of housing. I think you can just start the process when you get there. I wouldn't worry too much about being overly proactive. Like, you should still get an idea and have a budget and have like a mindset of what you'll do when you get there. But I don't think it's necessary to totally like schedule appointments with landlords that week. But doing it during your immersion program, you should be okay. Question, I think this will be for the orientation leaders. What are some areas, if you have any insights from friends or anything, and we can talk on it too, but what are some areas outside of the city center that might be a little bit outside that might be a cheaper option? So places that are maybe not in Seoul or Moasanya or Chueca, but any thoughts on that? Anyone?
I mean, there are like, kind of like towns kind of outside the center. Like there are places like Getafe, which is, a lot cheaper, nicer, more chill. I taught in Alameda de Osuna and Barajas, which are also much cheaper places. Barajas is the neighborhood by the airport. And Alameda de Osuna is actually, pretty nice, but farther from the center. So that would be cheaper. And then I live in Prosperidad, but it's actually, which is also pretty nice, but it's not that much cheaper actually. So I don't know if you guys also recommend any neighborhoods.
I do. It's off of the line that I used to teach at. So if you're looking at that map and you go all the way down to the right, you see Arganda del Rey, along that line is the line 9. So anywhere along there is pretty cheap and pretty safe, in my opinion. A lot of my friends worked out in Rivas, like Vacia Madrid, Rivas Urbanizaciones. So especially in Arganda, there's a lot of cheap places. There's a lot of cheap places along that. Vallecas, I do really like. It's, if you like football, there's a football stadium out there for Rayo Vallecano. So it's really fun out there as well. It's pretty safe in my opinion. I feel safe at night walking around. I would also say around Carabanchel and like Uceda, where you just were.
Yeah, I just clicked, sorry. I'm
good. My school is down there this year. I think those, and a lot of my friends maybe pay like $350 for rent, and that includes like utilities. It's anywhere outside the center, I think is relatively cheap. It just depends on how far you want to be.
Look at this picture when you look at Carbuncle.
I like the dog.
I have some friends who live in Legazpi, which is a nice neighborhood a little south of the center. And it's, as we've said, more affordable than the center as well. Puerto del Angel in Latina, as in the district Latina, not the neighborhood La Latina. It's confusing. That's a pretty nice area. Someone called it the Williamsburg of Madrid the other day, which is crazy. But there are places out there.
Yeah, if you look, like one thing is like looking at this map. Okay, we'll zoom out. Is there's like the M30 and M40, which are like circular highways, and living inside those circular highways will probably be more expensive than being slightly outside. So I know like we have a lot of teachers in this area of Alcacorn, Leganes, Scatave. You could live near here and still be able to catch a metro in. So living inside this M30, M40 area versus outside will be a big difference. Let's see what else. Okay, can we arrive earlier than our start date? Yeah, it depends on your visa. But yes, your arrival date will be the first day of your hotel. Well, yeah, will written Q&As be available in the recording? Good question. Yes, we can add, we can throw the questions in. We'll probably add them to, actually we'll add them to your Canvas course, the written in questions, so that you can see those later. I'm not going to answer questions not related to housing. Safety tips, we're going to talk about that at orientation. But any safety tips from you all about like where you live and, you know, making sure you're feeling safe in your housing?
Always be aware of your surroundings. Definitely. No, really. The first day that Erica and I were walking into our apartment, we were moving all of our things in. A guy walked up behind me. I promptly had to yell at him because he thought I couldn't hear him unzipping my bag. Eric and I thought he was trying to get in, so we're trying to let them go ahead of us into the building. He was like, no, we'll wait for you guys. And he tried to unzip my bag to, you know, try and steal whatever. But I heard the zipper, so I very nicely told him to leave us alone. So yeah, keep an eye out for your things. Just, I know having fun is a great activity to do, but do be aware. Anything can happen. Things will happen. Things can go wrong. Thankfully, nothing like that has ever happened to me again, but things have been stolen from my friends and they weren't paying attention. That's my biggest thing.
Property crime like that is the highest in the center. It's the highest in the touristy areas. So keep that in mind when you're searching for your place to live. You know, there are, like, violent crime is not an issue in Madrid like it is in some other places in the world. But property crime and certainly pickpocketing and things like that, you know, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in the center almost always.
Yeah, and a few things that you can do to make yourself more of a target that you should avoid include if you're walking alone, talking really loud on the phone in English, looking like you're very, very lost. And then also just, you know, like Caitlin said, be aware of your belongings. Is your purse open on the metro? Are you keeping your phone in or wallet in your pocket? Those are things that if you're not from a big city, you might not be as mindful of, but just, make sure to know where your purse is. Maybe guys, don't keep your phone in your back pocket. I know that's how some of my guy friends have been pickpocketed, but just keep an eye on your stuff and you'll be okay.
A couple of things that I do. If I have a backpack with me, like at a restaurant or on the metro or anything like that, I always have some, like, it's going to be very difficult for them to take it from me, such as putting my leg through one of the straps while it's sitting there. Because if they try and take it, they're going to pull my leg with it, and I'm going to know immediately and be able to stop them. Another thing is I don't keep anything in my back pockets, only front pockets, my wallet, my keys, my phone. I don't carry a purse. I just keep everything in my front pockets. My hands are in my pockets on the metro usually. So if someone tried to reach in, they'd be holding my hand. So that's kind of how I deal with those things. Everyone kind of has their own way of doing it, but just be aware of everyone around you, and at any time it could happen. And it's different than in the US, for example, where it's a lot more violent when people take things from you. Here it's not violent. They're probably just going to take it and walk away, and you might not even notice. So just be aware of the things in your possession, and where they are, and my advice is to be able to always feel them. Like if you can feel that your phone is in your pocket, you can feel that your backpack is strap is on your leg, you're a lot more likely to know if it's being taken or not.
Another question is, and this, I think a lot of people live or work in this area, so it's general, but does any of you guys, the four of you, know about Alcobendas? Are you familiar? Any of you? Yeah, any thoughts?
It's a relatively nice area. One of my friends worked out there. I have to go to school out there. Yeah, it's a nice area. I don't really have anything bad to say about it. I like it up there. It's different. And the one thing that they have out there is probably just schools. Like all of most of the universities are out there. Mine is.
Sorry, it's also the wealthier areas of town. So like a little farther north, like Alcobendas, and then farther west, like Aravaca, you can see on the map. Those are a little wealthier. So I don't know if it would be cheaper to live there, maybe, but I'm not sure.
But it could be a good place to find tutoring jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely.
This is a good question. I have a school in Cabeza de Saga. Let's see where that is. This is a good example of somewhere that might be further from the center. And so what they're asking, what the recommendation, if you're working out here and Madrid is here, would it be good to live in like Leganés or Getafe? I think my answer would be yes, because then it gives you the best of both worlds, that you're still in a really busy area with a lot of people, can commute easier to the south, but then you're also a quick, or it's a good middle ground area to be able to access your school and then also be able to access the center and live. There's a ton of teachers who are working in this area, so you'll find people to be roommates with. But any other thoughts on figuring out that with commuting?
I personally think that when you're searching for where you should live, look at the metro lines, look at the cercanías, and look at bus lines. And also even like how often the trains and the metro and the buses go from that location. Now, metro's going to be pretty quick no matter what. But that'll help you kind of determine, because if there's a train that goes there, but like all trains go to Atocha, to and from Atocha, but not every station is going to be connected to all the trains. So if you live near a train station, it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get to your school easier. In fact, sometimes you will have to go all the way to Atocha and then all the way back, even if they cross paths. So check out those lines and see, because it might actually be quicker to live near Atocha than it would be in this particular case. I don't know. But it might even be closer to live near Atocha than commute wise, like the time that it will take. It just depends on the different lines that you'll have to deal with.
Yeah.
I like this is, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna, so you're recommending IC City Mapper. If you can use Google Maps, the Spanish Google Maps, I think that's how I find my public transportation. So that's a pretty good idea to get an idea of how long that commute would be. But I know some people who use City Mapper too.
Yeah, there's a difference between, like, I was just on Google Maps US version, but then make sure you put in the .es and that actually will change your search. So good tip as well. But yes, the .es will be different. I'm going to do just a few more questions. I would love to get to everyone's neighborhoods, but we're not going to do that, unfortunately, with time. But a good question I think everyone would have is, how common is it to find a furnished apartment? And I think the answer is very common, but all of you found furnished, right?
Yeah, very common.
Yep. And how late do the trains and metros run? If I'm out with friends, do they stop at midnight? Like what time? How late can I be out on a school night?
So I know that the metro closes at 2 a.m., but the final trains run at 1:30. So if you're in a metro area, that's the deal. The buses, I think the night buses start at midnight, I think. And then Cercanías, I'm not sure. I think that they end earlier. Jam, do you know?
I think I live right by the trains. I hear it. I'm pretty sure it ends around like 11:30. I think in the summer it might go a little bit later, like to midnight or a little bit after midnight. But they pretty much are done around 11:30. So they're kind of the first ones to be out. And then the metros, I actually think I've been on the metro past 2:30 before. So, but again, it has to do with whenever, because I live a bit north of like the center, so it has to do with when the last train leaves the original spot. So I would say you don't wanna risk that too much. But I mean it if you know, like if you live kind of a little bit farther out, chances are that the train won't have gone past before 2, so you might be able to catch it. It just depends. And yeah, the buses, night buses don't run as frequently by any means. They're not that great. In fact, sometimes I plan like a night around when the night bus runs. But they kind of kick in around the time that the actual buses stop, but sometimes there's a couple, like an hour or more in between each night bus, usually more, but it depends on where you're going.
I'm going to ask one more question because I think we need to wrap it up. And then if you have any other questions, you can email us. We'll email everyone back as we do. And this is a really good question, but is it significantly harder to find an apartment for 3 people? Okay, let's say, for example, for 3 people or 4 people, like, you want an empty apartment, 3 or 4 bedrooms versus finding a single bedroom in an already occupied room. Because I know that we get that question a lot of like, oh, I have 3 of my best friends, we all want to go find an apartment together, or I'm going alone and I'm flexible and we'll just move in. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's easiest. Oh, go ahead, Spencer.
Okay, yeah, I would say that it's generally easier to find a single room, especially if you're hoping for it to be furnished. If you've got a group of 4 people, you might find a beautiful apartment, but the chances of it not having anything in it are higher.
Yeah, but that being said, I know tons of people who found apartments for 3 or 4 people. I think 2 is kind of the hardest number actually, just because, apartments are more expensive, so it's easier to split the cost. But while 1 person is the easiest, it's definitely possible still with 3 or 4. I think I even know people with a 5-person apartment. So it's possible, but easiest with 1.
Awesome, cool. Okay, well, if you have any other questions, feel free to email us. And thank you so much to Jam, Spencer, Kaylin, and Catherine. And yeah, we'll send this recording within a day. We'll upload those questions that came in Canvas that you can kind of get some more information in case that yeah, we were just talking a lot. Anyway, thank you so much and talk to you later. Bye.
Good luck.